Straight off of the Life tour, Andrew Schulz's latest comedy special is titled Life. Andrew Schulz is a great stand-up comedian and podcaster out of New York. He's the co-host of both the Flagrant podcast and Brilliant Idiots with Charlemagne the God. He's also credited with the current promotional approach of stand-up comics to leverage YouTube for putting out bits and full-length comedy specials. The idea being to get the attention of fans, even if it's by giving away content for free, and establishing your fan base and ultimately what their world is about, which is eyeballs. Getting eyeballs on your content and using all those avenues to drive purchases to your hard ticket live shows, and also as leverage at the negotiating table for your future comedy specials and additional content, all without the need of the network gatekeeper approval. He's gone from viral YouTube clips to major global world tours, including selling out Madison Square Garden within 90 minutes. That's within an hour and a half of it being announced, sold out. And with so much demand that he had to add a second show. This latest stand-up comedy special, Life, came out on Netflix on March 4th, 2025. In this special, his storytelling abilities and comedic chops were at the forefront, where he transforms the deeply personal experience of trying to have a kid with his wife, which ultimately led him and her down the IVF route, into a hilarious and relatable comedy special. So absolute shout out to Andrew Schulz for putting this together. I wanted to speak to for the production and presentation of the special. The special was filmed at the Beacon Theater in New York, and there's actually this whole drama behind that, which he spoke to on Flagrant. If you're a podcast fan, you'll know it, but for the uninitiated, we give a bit of a background too. He had another theater locked in and ready to shoot a special, a theater in Brooklyn, which he didn't name, which I thought was classy in terms of, taking the higher ground and not shitting on them too much. And also probably wise from a legal perspective and, maybe getting sued for defamation down the line or something like that. But he had this theater locked in Brooklyn, and with a couple weeks to go to shoot the special. So, they did the walkthroughs of this theater, sound checks and, contract signed, good to go, literally within a couple weeks, 2 weeks. And this was around Thanksgiving of last year, if I remember correctly, because it was going to be that Thanksgiving weekend. I think the filming was going to be on Black Friday, or maybe that Saturday, but it was definitely that holiday weekend. After Schulz had Donald Trump on his podcast, with again a couple weeks to go before shooting the already locked in, sold out shows at this theater for his special, the theater reached out to him and his business manager and canceled the taping. They said that they couldn't honor their agreement and would no longer be allowing him to shoot his special there. And look, I think Trump is a vile human being who cares so deeply about himself and himself alone that will go against anyone or anything that he's ever said as long as it serves some sort of self-interest in the moment, including his main campaign promise of getting us out of wars and not starting any new wars, which he definitely hasn't gotten us out of any new ones, and is very much so about to get us into another, or at the very least supporting and egging it on to continue and escalate. But where I think my friends on the left get it wrong, as much so as my friends on the right, which is very much so rooted in what that Brooklyn theater decided to do, backing out of the venue booking agreement that they had with Schulz, is that speaking to someone from the other side isn't a crime. We're supposed to speak to folks from the other side. How else will you win them over? How else will you spread your ideas? How else will you check your own thoughts and ideologies by allowing other opposite thoughts and ideologies into your world to wrestle against them and actually objectively consider them? That whole idea of, if you quote unquote platform someone from the other side, you're just as bad or you're a Nazi, is such a fucking joke. The folks on the left that think that literally equal the folks on the right that think that. The folks on the extreme right call the folks on the extreme left Nazis, and the folks on the extreme left call the folks on the extreme right Nazis. It's like, you guys are the fucking Nazis. You extreme fucks, you guys are the problem. But I digress. Thankfully though, with 2, maybe 3 weeks tops to go on a holiday weekend, the Beacon Theater in New York, which I've been to several times, stepped up to the plate and were like, yo, you can shoot your special here if you want, which Schulz did, and it was amazing. So shout out to the Beacon Theater for standing up for just playing their position. You're a theater, you're a venue. You're in the business of renting out your venue for whatever artistic expressions or reasons that your theater is rented out for. You're not supposed to be some sort of manifestation of a political statement. But anyway, on a lighter note, and speaking to the production and presentation of the special, I wanted to speak about the promo with Matt motherfucking Damon. Matt, A-list celebrity, superstar Damon, which was a great marketing tool for the special and such a huge get. And the guys on the Flagrant Pod broke it down. Schulz had them, like the other guys that are part of the podcast, like Dove and Mark, as like extras in this promo. And they broke down how it came to be. And apparently Schulz has met Matt Damon enough times that they're friendly. You know, they're not friends, but they're friendly and have each other's numbers. And he said that, you know, he worked on this text to Matt Damon because they had this idea to see if Matt Damon would cut a promo for the special. It's a grandiose idea. And he was like that he worked on the text for like an hour or two and pretty much gave Matt Damon every out possible in the initial text and saying, you know, this is kind of a dumb idea, but just putting it out there. I definitely understand. I'm pretty sure you can't do it. It's not going to work around your schedule, this, that, and the other. And pretty much asked him if he could do a promo for a special. And the idea essentially was that, you know, in everything that Matt Damon is in, he plays the hero and everybody loves him and he's this affable person. And they were, what if we cut the promo of you but being more of a dick, of a villain kind of. And he pretty much sends this text to Matt and is expecting him to say, you know, either not respond or just say, of course not. And Matt responds, apparently, according to Schulz, nonchalantly, he's like, yeah, sure. Can you do it on a Tuesday though? Because I don't have anything going on next Tuesday, but can you do it between the hours of 9 and 2? Because I got to take the kids to school and then I'll pick them up at 2. So if we can do it within that time, I'll be there. And Schulz was kind of like, of course, and moved everything around to fit that schedule and shot a really epic, really funny promo. Probably the best promo I've seen for a comedy special, honestly. And, you know, might be biased because I'm a Matt Damon fan, but who isn't, right? If for whatever reason you don't want to see the Schulz special, which I obviously think you should, at the very least, watch this promo, which is hilarious in and of itself. It's 2 or 3 minutes long, and they break the fourth wall at the end and both start cracking up, and it's just completely worth a watch. So definitely check that out. Then in continuing here with a couple points more of related to production and presentation, his father introduces him on stage, which is definitely an emotional touch. You know, just being his pops first and foremost. You know, what a proud moment to be able to do something where you can give that moment to your father and vice versa. But also knowing the background with his father having dementia, which my father does as well. But before that progresses, being able to give him that moment while he still can is priceless. It was definitely cool to see. Now the stage visual, the setup was pretty cool. There was this background screen that you don't even notice until he actually uses it. And it comes into play later on in the special. But it was blended into the actual curtains the whole time, which created this subtle yet immersive look, which I thought was pretty dope. And I forget where he mentioned this, but there was a surround sound mixing of the special or something like that, where the actual crowd audio was placed throughout the sound field, which makes listeners at home feel more present. It must have been either on Flagrant or maybe on Brilliant Idiots or on some other pod, but that was a bit meta for me in terms of within the comedy special sound mixing world. But still a cool takeaway to know that they go that deep into the weeds, into the details of what it is that they put out. It just shows how much they care about their craft. And a writing takeaway writing insight rather, that I took away from that. And it's not a direct application of those things that I can think of or link to writing prose, for example. But it is absolutely worth noting that in a more visual medium or even an audio medium, so like stand-up or podcasting, for example, production design and attention to that and sound mixing absolutely enhance the audience connection and emotional tone of what it is that you're putting out. Now let's talk about the vulnerability and honesty of this special. So Schulz digs into his IVF journey with openness and humor, turning something emotionally fraught into an experience the audience can laugh and empathize with. And he does this masterfully. He takes you from beginning to end of how they try to get pregnant naturally at first, and that didn't work. Then they wound up doing testing after trying for a long time, both of his wife's ovaries and eggs, and also on his side, his sperm. And up until this point, he's assuming that whatever the issue is it's on her side, which is an, ignorant guy thing to do that I'm sure we can all relate to. And then this is where we find out that the issue is actually with Andrew. And he finds out that he has lazy swimmers due to taking the hair pill finasteride for like over a decade. And he has this really funny bit where he's telling the doctor that they're marketing this pill completely wrong, that they shouldn't market it as a hair loss drug. He's like, you're telling me you can have sex with as many women as would let you without needing to use a condom, and you can never get them pregnant, and that the side effect is that you'll have beautiful, luscious hair? You guys should market this shit as the limitless pill. And going through all this testing, he also has bits about the humbling experience of going through the sperm testing and collection process. And he's like, a sperm in a cup looks a lot less than sperm on a back. He was like that he could have fit his entire sample in like a contact lens case, which I thought was a funny ass line. So then after finding this out, they wind up trying IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. That also does not work. And then ultimately trying IVF, which is the last resort and is known as the in vitro fertilization. And he takes us, again, in a funny way, but also heartfelt way through that whole experience, and how it was having to inject his wife with estrogen and progesterone hormones every morning as well as every night. And he has this funny line where he's like, and what do you guys think happened to her demeanor after a few weeks of injecting her with more woman juice? Do you think she became more rational? Oh, and I think earlier on, he also said something else to the effect of that the entire process is like super hard for the woman, physically and emotionally, and it's very expensive for the man. And I don't think we speak about that enough. And just a writing insight that I take away from the vulnerability and honesty here is that vulnerability humanizes comedians and writers, and sharing authentic struggle lets the humor land deeper and fosters a connection with the audience. I'd say just as much as within stand-up comedy as it would within writing prose. I also wanted to speak about a little bit the cultural commentary through jokes within his special. And a big thing that Schulz is known for is that everyone can get these jokes, as he says. Different cultures, religions, sexes, whatever your sexual preference is, etc. And he did not disappoint on that front in this special. There's this recurring character, he calls him the Italian meatball nurse guy, that shows up throughout the special. And he does that, stereotypical Italian accent for him, which is hilarious, along with a couple of super funny bits. He has a Puerto Rican baby joke where he says, how because he's speaking to when the baby first comes out, how it's a lot darker than the skin tone that they ultimately take on. And he's like, how all frogs are born tadpoles? All babies are born Puerto Rican. And they make them white by heating them up under a 7-Eleven taquito lamp. Just hilarious. Then he has Muslims always trying to out-Jew the Jews. And he speaks to, I forget how he worked this in, but he has this piece where he highlights religious one-upsmanship. He's taking on the persona of a Muslim, and he's saying, like, they fast for one day? Fine, we'll fast for the whole month. And then he's like, how many times a day do they pray? Fine, we'll pray 5 times a day. And then he's like, oh, they only circumcise the boys? Alluding to female circumcision and stuff like that. A masterclass in letting the audience fill that piece in. But a writing insight that I took away from that is how Schulz skillfully balances edgy cultural commentary with charm and self-awareness. Most importantly, showing how comedians, and I would argue writers, can navigate sensitive topics with wit. And I think we can take away from that as writers, doing the same thing in prose, being confident and brave with our perspectives, but sharing them in a thoughtful way, not losing sight of that part. Now let's speak to the structuring and storytelling of the special. The narrative structure subtly takes us through Schulz's journey, from fertility challenges to supporting his wife, to the fear of miscarriage, to acceptance and resilience, and ultimately a happy ending. And there's this heart-wrenching moment related to the fear of a miscarriage, which definitely caught me off guard. It got me fucking emotional. Then I made my wife watch the special, and she was fucking bawling as well. And it's this moment where after they finally get pregnant, his wife wakes up in the middle of the night. She had a nightmare saying that she thought that she lost the baby, or she had a dream rather, a nightmare, where she did lose the baby. And she woke up, she went to the bathroom, then she starts screaming from the bathroom, and there's blood everywhere. And this is, after the whole journey of, trying naturally, then trying IUI, then trying IVF, finally getting pregnant, and then while being pregnant, thinking that you lost a baby, because obviously that's what you're gonna think, right? You have a horrible dream about a miscarriage, you're having stomach pains, you have blood. That's the logical conclusion. And the climactic moment of this part of the story's arc was that they get to the hospital, they start checking his wife and the baby, and on the baby rather. And while that's going on, Schulz said that he apologizes to his wife. And he says to her that this is his problem, and his problem has caused in her the most difficult time in her life, and that he can't protect her from it. And that he's really sorry about that. And she says to him, "You don't have problems anymore. We have problems, and we'll figure this out together." And that was just a beautiful, emotional beat within this stand-up special that perfectly segues into a video compilation. This is where that screen, that again, you don't know is a screen up until this point, really. I think there was, actually, he did show the screen once before, but he shows this montage of videos of this entire experience that he's speaking about, going through all the injections and finding out that they're pregnant, and then this scary checkup in the hospital after thinking they have a miscarriage. Again, bringing the audience in to this very emotional moment with them, and then hearing the baby's heartbeat together. And it was such an emotional sigh of relief. And then the baby being born, etc., etc. And the writing insight that I take away from that is that structuring comedy with emotional arcs can elevate that comedic set beyond laughs into something memorable and affecting. And from a writing perspective, I'll take it a step further with not just balancing humor with vulnerability, but doing so vice versa, and also with other inverse themes or tones, such that they coexist and each sharpens the other, which will create a more resonant and layered storytelling experience. On a point of personal reflection, I know a couple of people that have gone through IVF, one successfully and one not, and that can definitely take a toll on people in their relationships. It's such an emotionally and obviously physically all-encompassing thing. And I thought that Schulz's ability to turn a difficult chapter into accessible, resonant comedy is inspiring. Obviously for people going through something similar, but also for me as a writer and as a creative. Great stand-up comedy often lives in the tension between laughter and heart, and Schulz masters that balance here with this special. And a writing insight that I definitely take away from that is don't be afraid to mind the hard parts of your life for your writing. That's likely where the deepest connections can happen. To my listeners out there, what personal story could you tell through humor? To my fellow writers out there, definitely consider exploring vulnerability in your work. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, definitely check out Andrew Schulz's latest comedy special, Life, streaming now on Netflix, as well as Schulz's other content, like his other specials, the Brilliant Idiots podcast, and Flagrant Pods, which I will definitely link to in the episode notes for you fine folks to check out.